We carry it around with us almost everywhere we go. We have this amazing tool that we can access in a millisecond, any time of day or night. And it also gets in our way a little bit. You are a truly astounding creature. And this brain of yours, although it's the organ we know the least about in the human body today, we do know that you can understand and solve complex problems and structures. You're a pattern-seeking animal, and you can use those well. Now, your brain also does tend to get in the way. A lot of that because of the pace at which we're expected to operate today. Think about for just a moment, when was the last time the adult human creature evolved significantly? Was it in the last 50 years? How about the last 10 years? Did we change dramatically as creatures? And yet, if you pause and ponder for a moment, you realize the world changed. The pace that we're expected to operate at today does not coincide with the way that our brain works most effectively. It causes us to do some really interesting things, some dysfunctional things like run red lights or text while we're driving, which I'm sure none of you would ever do. It causes us to run into meetings and people be late and not quite as prepared and talk about the same things we've talked about 150,000 times before and not follow up. All of those things we could attribute to speed today and the pressures that we feel around that. And the disconnect is our brain wasn't set up to do that well. A few other little disconnects we have is that because of speed, today we over-depend on biases, assumptions, opinions. That's not the way we do things here. That's a great idea, but get me that report on time. We don't have time to even ponder that possibility. So this brain of ours, although truly amazing and astounding at only 3 pounds, also is our worst enemy when it comes to keeping up in a hyper-paced world. The way that it works really is counter to all of the pressures we feel from the moment we wake up in the morning to just run. Just run. Just run and do it over. Don't worry. Just run and be active, but not necessarily effective. So I want to go through a few counterintuitive notions with you. I want to actually teach you to slow down. Slow down that so you're going fast. Slow down so that you have your team in the same race with you. Slow down so that you don't do it over, you only do it once. Slow down so that you're updating constantly. How many of you remember the last time you downloaded your brain refresh? We update, we reboot just about everything else. Unfortunately, much of the mental models, or we call them bubbles, that we're carrying around with us in our brain, the filters, the processing, haven't been refreshed in a while. But if we can slow down and visit, if we can create what we call neuro prompts, in Facebook language it would be like a little poke to your brain every now and then. If we can come up with those and insert them into our day in a matter of seconds every now and then, we'll actually be getting much more effective, getting to the end point much more quickly. So pausing has become critical. Slowing down just enough. Now, I'm not talking about omphalet skepsis, which is, of course, the art of staring at your navel. We really don't need to slow down that much. That's not what's required. As I said, I want to teach you some pokes, some prompts, neuro prompts that take 30 seconds here, a minute there, so that you get it right the first time. You have your team engaged in the same race, and you're executing to those things that you want to accomplish. So let's go through some of these, some of what we would call the core techniques. We actually use about 99 neuro prompts in the work that I do. Some of them are a little secret, okay? But the ones I want to share with you today are not. I will tell you on the surface they sound insanely simple, but don't be misled by that. This will be some of the hardest work you will ever do as a leader. Remember, the world is screaming at you. Just run from the moment you wake up. In fact, recent research says that about 78% of us with any kind of smart device or cell phone check it before we get out of bed in the morning. And what's the number one reason that they have to be replaced at work today? Because they fall in the toilet. I mean, if we can't learn to pause there, where can we pause? Right? So we start thinking about this, and what I want to teach you are counterintuitive notions that are completely logical. You'll nod your head and think, of course. But you're going to find it's a great challenge to do it. Of course, as leaders, you're set up to do them well. So the first prompt is to create clarity on what winning looks like, and of course to execute with excellence. Now, if I walked into your office tomorrow and I said to you, define and describe for me with specificity what winning looks like for your organization, let's just say 6 months from now. I bet most, if not all of you, could rattle off very quickly for me your core financial metrics, a couple of big projects. But I want you to sit back and think about for just a moment. How many of you believe your frontline employees are thinking about achieving your EBITDA as they answer the phone and deal with a challenging client? How many of them are thinking about your margin when they're not even sure where you make money or don't make money in the company? Creating clarity on winning means that you must be able to define with specificity what the targets are. So let me relate this a little bit to our personal life. You know, one of the things we often say is we're going on vacation. How exciting. Well, now vacation to you might mean Bali, and vacation to you might mean Boise. And although Boise is a wonderful place, trust me, I was just there, it's beautiful, it ain't Bali. And so it's a really fascinating thing that we presume and assume everybody thunks the same way we thunk. Just because we're clear and I use a word means that everybody understands it, right? It's obvious, isn't it so, don't you think? Creating clarity on winning means defining and describing it with specificity in ways that we're minimizing the interpretation that the brain of each of us constantly does. Constantly, we interpret almost every word differently. Meaning is unique to each and every one of us. So that clarity is critical. Now, we would use about 13 different categories to prompt your brain on defining excellence in your organization. Of course, your key operating metrics are critical. Your financials are absolutely an imperative. And so are a lot of other things. So really creating clarity on that win is where this starts. Imagine yourself as an elite athlete. Because you are. You just don't compete on a track or a football field or in a swimming pool, but you're certainly competing in probably a more competitive arena. Do you think Olympic athletes are crystal clear on the target? Of course they are, right? Michael Phelps doesn't say, I'm just going to swim fast. Crystal clear with specificity on what it will feel like, look like, and everything that he does drives to that win. And so we can learn a lot from the elite players around the world, from elite military teams and athletes and musicians and symphony orchestras. A lot to teach us that we can apply effectively at work about specificity on the win, and thus then tapping into our brain and really manipulating other humans, which I only teach you to do for good, manipulating them to get in that race with you, so that you do achieve what you set out to achieve. Creating clarity on winning is the cornerstone of everything I do. It is absolutely an imperative for you today. So if you pause and ponder just a moment, how many days do you feel like people showed up and weren't in the same race as you? But you see, here's the deal with the adult human. Our deepest and most core instinct is to win. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, I want to go to work and just suck today. Everyone wakes up instinctually wanting to win. The problem is most days at work, we all have a different definition. We all define it differently, and we're all running our own race. So we've got to get everybody in this race with us so that we execute on those things that you've decided are most important. Now, once you've gotten clarity on this winning, then you've got to master how to think differently within it. You know, innovation is not some scary secret magic thing. I promise it's not voodoo. It is a set of skills and capabilities that can be taught and can be nurtured and grown within an organization. Unquestionably so. Some of the people we often think of as the most innovative in the world were very, very focused on encouraging their brain to ponder and think differently. And so there are a lot of techniques around gathering dots. How do I fill my brain with enough information so that I can actually connect them in whole new ways? If you're not gathering dots, kind of hard to put them together. You don't have the pieces of the puzzle. So that's one technique. There are all sorts of ways we can challenge assumptions, change perspectives, simple 10-second prompts, ways that you can start your meeting. And of course, you'll have a companion guide for this presentation today where we'll give you all of those prompts, just enough to slow down so that you visit. Your brain does love when you come and visit, by the way. Gives you tremendous energy. Your brain loves to ponder and play just a wee bit. And I don't know how many of you are exhausted at the end of the week, even if you do what you love. Here's a fun counterintuitive notion. When you visit and you're truly using your brain to think, it gives your brain energy. How cool is that? In a world that's asking us to run from the moment we wake up until we go to bed at night, to be able to build back some energy is an astounding thing. And it really requires just a quick visit. Once we've done this, we've taught some core skills on thinking differently because of the pace of change, right? We don't want to be a Kodak or a Blockbuster or any of the other 87% of the Fortune 500 that are gone since 1967, by the way. Gone. Incredibly successful companies with very smart people, gone. Because they depended on what they had always done to get them to the next place. And everything changed. Everything changed in the world. So that thinking differently, the clarity on the win, the ability within that to think differently are really important first steps. And then you've got to engage all those darn humans. And I'll tell you, humans are pretty tough to engage. And yet in many ways, they're the easiest creature on this planet to manipulate. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with a herd of cows, but I promise you, humans are easier, much, much easier. Right? There are ways that we can prompt people to thunk what we want them to thunk. So engaging our organization through informing what are the targets? What does it look like when we've achieved excellence? What's our Bali? What does it look like when we've gotten there? Okay? Inspiring them. Why is this a cool journey? Why is this important to me as the leader? How fun is this going to be? What's in it for me? Remember, WIIFM, everyone's favorite radio station, we are all tuned in every single day to that. It doesn't matter who we are, what level we're at, what role we play in an organization. We can use that as leaders to really get everybody in this race with us. So engaging your organization is critical. You have got to get obsessive, relentless, just right there on the borderline of obnoxious, talking about winning. Really gathering everyone together focused on that race because it flips the switch. You know, the one thing you're better at than anything else as an adult human, other than playing to win, is proving yourself right. You are incredible at proving yourself right, don't you think? Isn't it so? Isn't it true that? Don't you think we should? It's obvious. You're excellent at proving yourself right. So if I can get everybody to understand this vision, if I can define and describe the targets with specificity, if I can teach you the core skills and capabilities on how to prompt your brain to thunk a little differently just every now and then, imagine what's possible. And then if I can flip that switch in you to start proving yourself right, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit, because this is how we think amazing thunks. And we, each of us, want to win. So engaging our organization by flipping that switch, defining the race, building the resources, the tools, setting everyone up to be successful within the organization versus keeping things a secret and then letting them know when they don't quite make it or in fact fail. Sounds easy, right? Sounds logical. It's common sense. And again, I go back to it'll be the hardest things you ever do because it does require about 30 seconds every now and then. It requires a minute or two here and there to prompt with the right question, to provide the right tool or resource. Now, once I've got everybody in this race with me and we're all at the same track and we're all running in the same direction and we're crystal clear on what the targets are, I've got to constantly improve and develop the skills and competencies that are required to thrive in today's world. Because today's world is not the same as the one that you grew up in as the leader. Highly likely that what really served you incredibly well has shifted just slightly and is going to continue to shift. By the way, doesn't look like anything's going to slow down anytime soon, right? It's just going to keep getting faster and faster. More and more of a hyper pace. So building these skills and competencies required. How do we learn to pause just long enough to say, what's the second right answer? We've always done it this way. It's worked pretty well for us. What's the second right answer? You see, the problem with that is that you've been taught from a very early age that there is one and only one right answer. Even Cookie Monster taught us that. Do you remember that little song? Which one of these things is not like the other? And if you went to school, any of you, if you had colored in multiple bubbles on the answer sheet, what would have happened? You would have been in the really special class, right? So we've been taught from an incredibly early age there was one and only one right answer. How often is that true in your organization? How often is it true in your industry? How often has that led really successful people and organizations to failure? So every now and then when we say we've been doing this the same way for a long time, we're absolutely positive it's the way everyone in our industry does it. There's your cue. What's the second right answer? And just time-bound the conversation. 2 minutes with your team. 2 minutes and you'll be stunned at what incredible thunks you're capable of thunking. What ideas and possibilities that you can come up with. And that's all it takes is about 2 minutes. Now you may decide, the first answer is still the best one. That's cool, that's okay. But if you get in the habit of just questioning it every now and then, it's amazing how you expand the possibilities and broaden your view, because your brain is always gathering pieces and parts, and it's putting them together in whole new ways, even while you're sleeping. So you know the synapses in your brain occur at 90% the same rate when you're sleeping as when you're awake. You're that amazing. You're that amazing. Now, we can also learn to challenge assumptions appropriately. We can create common language in our organization to do this amazingly well. I'll tell you real quickly one of my favorites. We call it MSU. MSU is something that we're all incredibly good at, really in our whole life, and particularly at work. MSU means we just make stuff. Be careful. We make stuff up. We make stuff up all the time. Because one time I lived down the street from a woman twice removed from my cousin who saw it on the internet, you remember. We make stuff up all the time. You know how the boss is. He or she won't let us do this because one time 10 years ago they said blah, 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 blah. So if every now and then we can question each other appropriately, if we have the tools to just pause and slow you down a little bit and say, is that MSU or what data have you got? And let's walk through that data together so you and I are on the same path instead of me just talking bad about you in the break room. Right? So there's all sorts of ways we can do all of these in our organizations today. How do we use visual prompts? The fastest way to the adult human brain is a visual. It's a visual. Visual imagery is typically 60,000 times more effective than text. How do I get to your brain really quick? Visuals. If I walk down the hallway of your building and I can't tell you what winning looks like, I bet you can't either. Visuals are really critical, and they're a wonderful way to get people to think about what I want you to think about. How about we put up a target customer as a customer of the month for next month? How about I get the goals up in a graph, a chart? How about I create a commitment wall that has our core objectives and everybody sign it? And I post milestones on that. Think about every time someone sees that, what do they think? How can I contribute? I want to be a winner. I'm driven to that. So simple ways, again, we can flip that switch to use the brain amazingly well, to play to the core tendencies and instinctual reactions we have as an adult human. So, my mantra is pause. Slow down just enough to get it right, just enough to get your team in the same race with you. Slow down enough to visit your brain. It loves when you visit, remember. It really likes when you come and play a bit. And think. While you're pausing, think. Change perspective. Challenge assumptions. Go back and ask questions like, what do you think is the one thing that's going to take us out of business to your frontline employees? And listen. They knew at Kodak. They knew. And listen, change perspective. What if your competitor came in and bought you today? What new product or service would you bring to market? Why don't you go ahead? Change perspective. Challenge assumptions. Focus. Relentlessly. Obsessively. Right there on the borderline of obnoxiously on winning. Because if you're not playing to win on your very best day, you're working really hard to not lose. And how many of you want to be not losers? It's not a lot of fun. Not a lot of fun. So focus relentlessly on winning. Talk about it constantly. The beginning of every meeting, restating what are the targets, what is winning, what's in it for me and for you when we do. Now, when everyone else dies and I'm the queen, I'll take off that last one, but until then, you're going to have to run. The world's not going to slow down. But if you will pause, think, and focus in the running, every now and then, you'll be running in the right direction. You'll be running the same race with your whole team in it. And I guarantee you, it'll be a lot more fun. Use that brain of yours.